Today I'm going to review another mechanical head, brand new one that just came out in the market from G5. It's the DeadMeat Broadhead. All right, they're going for the graphic title here. So this is a really impressive head in many ways by its design. First of all, it's 3-blade, and it has a cutting diameter when the blades are fully employed of 1.5 inches, which is nice. That gets quite a bit of cut going on there. Perfect for whitetail, turkey, smaller hogs, and so forth. As you know, I'm a real fixed blade guy, but I'm always looking at the latest, greatest, and always willing to try some new mechanical heads. But I like that configuration of the blades. I like that it's really stout, as you can see. It's got a super short profile, and when the blades are closed, in the closed position, it's a really small profile. These things fly incredibly well. They come with a ballistic match point, which looks just like this in its shape. It's basically a practice head without having to make as fancy of a practice head. Flies just like this head would fly, and it's extremely forgiving. So a lot of heads fly very well. My bow is really well tuned. I can pop balloons with fixed blades out to 100 yards, but this is on the extra forgiving side for sure. So I love that. I love that it's also solid steel construction. That's a big plus. Everything is steel. However, on the downside, I don't like that it's just metal injection molding. I'm not a huge fan of that. It's still good, and it's better than a lot of aluminum, but it's not as good as a machined head, and I know it would cost a lot more if it were machined. But anyway, it is still solid steel, and it's actually the ferrule, I think, is two different pieces of steel, and then the blade, so it's a few different composite pieces of steel, but it is 100% steel, I should say. Has a cool retaining clip that maybe you've read about, this blue retaining clip that's replaceable, and that allows the blades to be locked into place, and when they are locked into place, they do make a little snap sound, so you know that the blades are in place. I like that a lot more than a rubber band. Not a fan of rubber bands, and a lot more than the retaining clip that Rage uses, where you're hoping it's really in there, but it doesn't have that little dimple to lock it in place. And so I like that. These blades should not come apart when they're bumped on grass or something like that, if they are in a stock, and they shouldn't come apart in flight at all. So I'm going to shoot it through what I do with most mechanical heads. I'm going to shoot it through this piece of plywood, and the plywood that I have is a 3/8 inch piece of plywood. In previous mechanical tests, I called it a 1/4 inch. Sorry, my bad. It's actually 3/8. I just measured it. So I'm going to shoot it into that, and that's my favorite thing to do with mechanical heads, to see how well they deploy upon entrance, and to see how well they penetrate, and to see how well they hold up to that plywood. It's similar in consistency to bone in many ways. So I do that with fixed blades. I like to put them through concrete, and I like to put them through steel and kind of everything else, just because they can handle that. But I don't think mechanicals are going to be able to handle that. But that's okay. I just like to test it through the plywood. If they don't hold up to plywood, then I'm not hunting with them for sure. So let's see what happens with the DeadMeat in the 3/8 inch plywood. Now this total arrow weight, in case you're wondering, is just over 500 grains, and it's a footed hex 330 shaft, and I'm going to be shooting it out of a 73-pound Hoyt Carbon Spider 30. Okay, let's see what happened here. It looks like the blade's fully deployed on impact, although, to be honest, let's see if I can zoom in here. It looks like 2 of them deployed all the way. Those 2 on the right, sorry about that, I keep moving the camera. This one on the left appears to not have deployed quite as much. That's interesting. Maybe because it's going with the grain, it was an easier impact and didn't deploy as much, but it didn't deploy as much. Let's see on the other side. Let me zoom out. Okay, you can see the exit made certainly a nice hole. Penetration was really good, actually. Okay, so we just shot it into this wood, and it was a 3/8 inch plywood. I had some dirt behind it. In the previous test that I did with the hypodermic and with the Kill Zone and with the Gravedigger, I had Reinhardt target behind it to stop it. It's a little easier to pull it out of the dirt, so I went with that. That way, it's hard to compare penetration with that previous test, and you can check out my other YouTube video on that mechanical battle head-to-head test. But this, I'd say it's still penetrated well. The blades, I wanted to note this earlier, they're extremely sharp going in, and they're still okay, kind of sharp. I mean, you know, I can do that all day. I couldn't have done that before. They're not that sharp, okay, right now. So they dulled significantly, such as, you know, metal injection molded blades. And I do want to note too that these blades held up remarkably well, I would say. The only one that had a little bit of a problem, I don't even know if it'll zoom in here and you can see that, is this one had a little bit of a bend to it, a slight concave down bend. I mean really slight, way less of a bend than the hypo did. So a little bit of a bend right there, but otherwise it held up extremely well, still spun true with the blades open and closed, and the retaining clip is still in place, although they come with extras. It's nice to know that you have that. I do want to remind you that on the entrance hole, nice as it was, one of the blades did not fully deploy. It deployed about maybe 3/4 of the way, but it wasn't full. It's the only critique that I've heard from a buddy who tested this on Archery Talk into plywood as well, is he found that one of the 3 heads, the blades did not deploy at all. And upon further inspection, he found that there's this groove that the blades kind of slide in. You can see how they slide like that, and sometimes there can be little burrs inside there. That was the case with his, and it's why they didn't open. He talked to G5 about it. Of course, they replace them, but that'd be something to test. I tested all of mine before I shot it to make sure there weren't those burrs, and that the blades slid open effectively. So test that before you shoot them. The other thing I want to note, good durability. I'm impressed with that. Really good cutting diameter size with a 3-blade. I mean, that's going to punch a hole. I'm impressed with that. The only thing that is a little concerning is you can see the blade angle on that is really steep when they're fully deployed. So that's quite a blade angle. That's almost horizontal. And, you know, typically just physics-wise, that's not going to get as good a penetration as if it were like that. So that's just something to consider. But I wouldn't think this is a problem at all with deer, with smaller hogs, certainly with turkey. I think it'd be, you know, antelope, stuff like that. I think it'd be a winner of a head if that's what you're looking for, especially where flight is a key component, like pronghorns, where maybe you're shooting out to 100 yards, where your bow isn't quite as well tuned, which I don't recommend. You ought to get it well tuned, but this will be an extremely forgiving head, even out of a bow that's not optimally tuned. And I think for smaller game, I think it'd do really well, smaller big game. Some people, I'm sure, would have no problem using it for an elk. Wouldn't be my choice on an elk. I've taken elk, and man, those bones can be really tough, and I would want to make sure that I personally use a fixed blade on an elk, but I'm sure it would take an elk if you hit it in the right place. So overall, I give this head a thumbs up. I was intrigued when it first came out on the market, and I'm just as intrigued now. I might put one through a deer later this year and see how it does.